Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is no small feat. This is a big one. Yes, this is the longest chapter. And, man, this is no small topic. Realize what I'm getting into here with these 18 chapters. But I'm going to do it. It's called The Way of Ultimate Reality. As I said, it's no small feat. Welcome to the direct path. The Way of Ultimate Reality. So, preamble to where we are at on the path. Chapter 1. Arjuna is stricken with grief. He's deciding he's not wanting to fight, and he's giving a good argument. Better for them to kill me than for me to kill them. Right? Isn't that better? So, he lays down his bow. He says, I don't see any good in committing this act. My mind isn't really at ease, but if I were to do this, then I think a lot of people would end up hurt. So, better for them to just take my own life, and I'll give it up. They can have it, they can have the kingdom, and they can enjoy it. So, Krishna isn't saying anything at this point. He's silent. But, at the beginning of chapter 2, he has a smile on his face. Smile comes on his face because he knows that the great words of the Gita, the song, like a flute that's being sung. The great Lord's playing the flute. You are the instrument. Arjuna is the instrument here in this context. And he's telling Arjuna to be the instrument in this cause. Let the Lord play the flute through you. So, this is I would say, the compendium of the essence of the Upanishads, the Mahabharata, the Puranas, all the Shastras, the Vedas, all of the texts. Chapter 2 is the compendium of the essence of all of Vedic literature. This is why Shankaracharya, who is the writer of this version of the Gita that I have, is the father of Advaita Vedanta. So Advaita means non-dual, and Vedanta means the end of knowledge. So if this is the end of knowledge, it means that there's nothing more for you to learn. All of the various texts, and this will be explained, is like a river leading into the ocean. And he gives this a knowledge here. What good is a pool? What good is a well when you're surrounded and flooded by the great ocean? So he's saying all of those pools and rivers and streams, they all lead to me in the end. This is the end of knowledge, the end of knowing. And I've heard the wise say that the end of knowledge, as well as one can take the Gita as the path, because you don't see Krishna as something separate from you. Krishna is your own mind here. Krishna is actually you. This is the mystery of Vedanta, non-dual. And why I'm using this version of the text by Shankaracharya is it was given to me by my father. I've read many other versions. Shankaracharya spoke to my heart. He's the only one I know who presented it from a non-dual perspective. Advaita Vedanta, the end of knowledge itself. So, Chapter 2, The Way of Ultimate Reality. We have Arjuna now. He's in the middle of the battlefield. He puts his bow Gandhaiva aside. It says, Krishna, better for them to kill me. I'm not going to fight. He lays on the side of the chariot, stricken with grief, and Krishna smiles. Because he knows the only way that can relieve one of their suffering, the only way to relieve one of such confusion and misery is to not hold anything back. Deliver them with the greatest sword that can cut through this ignorance. He's delivering the wisdom of ultimate reality and how to cut through it to its very core, beyond even the fear of death. He's not going to hold anything back here. He lays it all out. The end of knowledge in only the 2nd chapter. And this is why this is no small feat. Since this story is very dear to me, and I see it as the essence of my own mind, I'm going to convey what it means to me from my heart. So, Sanjaya, the charioteer of the blind king, he says, "Look at Arjuna. He's overwhelmed with pity, and his eyes are troubled with tears." Filled with tears, the great Madhusadana, which is Krishna, he says these words to the troubled Arjuna. He says, "In this crisis, O Arjuna, why does such lowness of spirit come to you? Unbecoming to an Aryan, a noble one. Dishonorable and an obstacle to the attainment of heaven." So these great warriors there, they believe that by being on the battlefield, by giving the great fights, and some of them have standards with crosses on it. The symbol of the cross, or the swastika, was known at the time. That was a symbol of sacrifice. That the sacrificial cross is a symbol of the two paths Krishna will outline in this chapter, the path of action and the pathway of wisdom. The pathway of action, to be in the world, leads to a sacrifice. And it's the sacrifice of the ego. But through doing this, by making even the sacrifice of battle, one acquires the heavenly worlds. So he's telling Arjuna, what you're doing by not even fighting is an obstacle to even the attainment of the heavenly realms for you. For the state of your mind at the time of death determines what heavenly realm you experience. If you're despondent, confused, your mind is always with you. Where would you take it? Where would you go separate from it? So he continues, "Do not yield to this unmanliness." Unmanly, man. "O son of Pritha," an epithet for his mother. "It does not become you. Shake off this base faint-heartedness and arise, O scorcher of the enemy." The scorcher of the enemy is an epithet of his name, Dhananjaya, the destroyer of obstacles. So then, Arjuna, hearing these words of Krishna, he's kind of taken back and says, "But how, O destroyer of Madhusadana, O slayer of the enemy, how can I fight with arrows on the battlefield against Bhishma and Drona, who are worthy of my worship?" So on the other side of him, on the battlefield, is Bhishma, who is his great-great-grandfather. And his grandfather works for the kingdom of the Kauravas, his enemy in this battle. Dronacharya is even on the other side, his teacher as a student that he spent his life learning archery from, that made him become renowned as the greatest archer in the world. And now he has to contend against the two people he loves the most. The two are the most respected people. How will I contend against Bhishma, my own grandfather? How can I contend against Dronacharya, my own teacher? He goes on. it would be better indeed for me to live on alms, live on begging, than to rather slay these high-spirited teachers of mine. And if I kill them, even here, if I enjoy wealth, it's going to be stained with blood. How can I enjoy that, he says. So he goes on, I do not know which would be better, that we should conquer them or they conquer us. Arrayed against us stand the very sons of Dhritarashtra, Dhritarashtra's 100 sons on the periphery. And after slaying whom, why would I wish to live? Basically, he's saying the world will be just turned into a hell realm. Not very fun. He's laying a good argument here. He continues, Arjuna in his grief. He says, overpowered in the very essence of my being by this evil commiseration, my mind is confused about the Dharma. I supplicate you, O Krishna, tell me in your soothing words which is the better path. I'm asking as your disciple. Okay, I'm asking as your instrument. Instruct me with your soothing words. I, who have taken refuge in you, who is surrendered. His bow is down. His heart is completely open. He's in the midst of pity. He does not want to kill his grandfather and teacher. And he surrenders unto Krishna. How did I get in this situation? Help me get through this. So indeed, he says, I see not to destroy the grief that is drying up my very senses. Even the attainment of unrivaled and flourishing dominion on earth and lordship over the gods in heaven. So Sanjaya, he's narrating now to the blind king. Arjuna having spoken thus to Hrishikesha, means Krishna as the Lord of the senses. Arjuna, the scorcher of the foe, said to Govinda. Govinda is another epithet for Krishna. They use all these names. Means of the cowherd, the cowherdsman, the milker of nectar, ambrosia, and nectar, which is wisdom, which is what Krishna is now about to bestow, the nectar of wisdom. Govinda. I will not fight, he says. I will not fight. And he fell silent and drops his bow. O descendant of Bharata, to him grieving in the midst of the two armies, Hrishikesha, smiling, spoke these words. So Sanjaya is addressing Dhritarashtra here as the descendant of Bharata. Bharata is the kingdom of India before it was named India. He's referring to Dhritarashtra in this context. And the two armies, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, Hrishikesha, being the lord of the senses, smiling now as he's addressed by Arjuna. Maybe you could put yourself in Krishna's shoes in this instance before he's about to speak. Knowing that this is a pivotal moment in the story. When his disciple, the greatest archer in the world, does not wish to fight, grief-stricken at the slaughter, the potential slaughter of all his kinsmen and his family members. He does not want to act, does not know what to do, he's confused, and he smiles. For he senses something very big is about to happen. The Gita is going to be spoken. The song of the Lord. And the song is the wisdom of nectar that pours through Krishna as the embodiment of the ultimate reality, the theme of the chapter. So, the only way to overcome this is to deliver Arjuna the sword of wisdom, to help him cut through with this nectar. He says, "You've been mourning for those who should not be mourned for, yet you speak words of wisdom. Neither for the living nor for the dead do the wise grieve." But the question was, why do the wise not grieve over death? And he's cutting through the answer now. "Never there was a time when I did not exist, nor you or these fellow kings of men. Nor will there ever be a time hereafter when all of us shall cease to be." So he's addressing that the eternal reality, the actual reality, is beyond life or death. And that if one knows that, what would you be grieving if nothing is actually lost? Still not enough to cut through Arjuna's pain. But he goes on. The example, the illustration he gives is, even as the embodied self passes in this body through the stages of childhood, a baby, a youth, and through old age, so does it pass into another body. Calm souls are not bewildered by this. The notions of heat, cold, pain, pleasure, they arise, O son of Kunti, only from the contact of the senses with their objects. They come and go. They are impermanent, so endure them. So, saying that the nature of reality is in a constant state of change, of heat, cold, pleasure, and pain. If it's always in a state of change, why would you grieve? Like the stage of we see of every life we hear, we know that every single person goes through that stage of childhood, youth, adulthood, into old age, birth, age, sickness, and death. And yet we still grieve knowing that that's reality. Still not enough to cut through Arjuna's grief, fortunately. So he goes on. The calm man who remains unchanged, Krishna says, in pain and pleasure, whom these cannot disturb, alone is able, O greatest of men, to attain immortality. So the immortal state being referred to here, for many of the awakened warriors on the battlefield have actualized the immortal state. Bhishma is Arjuna's grandfather, said to be an immortal. Dronacharya on the other side is said to be immortal. Ashwatthama, Dronacharya's son, said to be an immortal. These are warriors who have to will their life to die. They recognize the eternal. So, Krishna he's seeing that Arjuna has not recognized the immortal state of that which does not die. He thinks of himself as one who kills, as one who slays. So he does not see with the eye of wisdom. Still, it's not enough to cut through the delusion. It's not convincing enough of an argument. So Krishna goes on. The unreal never is. The real never ceases to be. The conclusion about these two is truly perceived by the seers of truth. So the unreal, if everything is in a constant state of change, what is there out there to kill if there's just change and fluctuations? And if the real, the ultimate reality, that which is eternal and does not die, has never ceased to be, why would you still grieve? So, he goes on, that by which all this is pervaded. This is, he's referring to the field of all the various warriors here, surrounded in this army. That by which all of this is pervaded. Know to be the imperishable. So he's laid it out in the beginning, the direct introduction, that even these warriors here are not separate from the immortal self, the eternal self, that which does not die. Know that this here is to the eternal. None can cause the destruction of that which is immutable. The immutable is that which does not change. And this is the discrimination of wisdom, the discerning wisdom necessary to identify the self from the non-self. So this is the path that he's outlining here of the yoga of wisdom, Jnana Yoga. The tools necessary to cut through the illusion and the density of ignorance and directly experience the nature of reality. Is capable of cutting through the grief and sorrow that Arjuna is currently in. We said, so what is unreal? Only the bodies of which this eternal, imperishable, incomprehensible self is the indweller are said to have an end. Therefore, fight. So, Krishna's words here is that the body will change. The body will have the fluctuations and go through ups and downs. The body will experience the birth, the aging, and the death. But that which is eternal is not the body. This is what he means by what is real, by what is unreal. The unreal is what is in a constant state of change. Since this body is comprised of the various elements and form and names, it's always in a constant state of change. The real is beyond birth and death. He goes on, because this is millennia of ignorance and hard-held belief. We grow up like, if I'm not my body, who am I? And understanding the nature of the self is the essence of the Gita here, of the yoga of wisdom, of what is the self. The self with a capital S, the supreme self, the self of ultimate reality. So he looks at the other side, sees Drona and Bhishma. His heart sinks. And Krishna sees his heart sinking. He said, he who looks on the self as the slayer, and he who looks on the self as the slain, neither of these apprehends right. The self slays not, and the self is not slain. So, this is the power of the yoga of wisdom. Is by understanding the self, you understand what is real. And what is real does not kill. Arjuna cannot kill. It is not him that does the act. If there has always been change, and that constant change, who would do the killing? Who would do the slaughtering? It is a mistaken ignorance here of an identity. Arjuna thinks that he is the doer, that I am the body, and I'm the one who's going to commit this evil act. So why does the self not change? The eternal self, not the body. Why is that changeless? It is never born, Krishna says. If it's not born, it cannot die. Only the body is born and dies. Nor having once been, does it cease. So it's neither being, nor does it non-being. These are names. That which is being eventually doesn't be. But the self is beyond being and non-being, beyond birth or death. Because that which is born has to die. The self with the real self cannot die. Unborn, he says, eternal, permanent, and primeval, ancient. It is not slain when the body is slain. So, he who knows it to be indestructible, unchanging, eternal, unborn, and immutable, changeless. How can that man, O Pritha, slay or cause another to slay? So, the analogy of, okay, this is good information, Krishna, but how can I apply that? Is this even relevant for this day and age, in this modern time? I mean, is this applicable? Krishna gives the analogy that even as a person casts off worn out clothes and puts on others that are new, so the embodied self casts off worn out bodies and enters into others that are new. Weapons cut it not, fire doesn't burn it, water doesn't wet it, wind doesn't wither it. So the elements are what comprise the form. But none of the elements, water, earth, fire, wind, affect the self. As you look for yourself, am I in the earth? Am I in the water? Where am I? Am I in the wind? Am I in the fire? One does not seem to find themselves. This is the process of neti. I'm not that, not that, I'm not that. If I'm not that, then what the hell am I? What remains beyond the process of looking for yourself in all of these things is the realization of non-duality. And what remains is the self. He goes on. They said this is not an easy chapter. This is the way of ultimate reality. So for this reason, it says the self cannot be cut, it cannot be burnt, it cannot be wetted, it cannot be withered. It is eternal, all-pervading, unchanging, immovable. The self is the same forever. So if the self, with a capital S, is immutable, changeless, and it's always the same, what changes then? What is changing? And this is the knowledge of your nature, like the end of knowledge. If you understand what your nature is, that your nature is also the field of consciousness, that your nature is changing, and that which is observing of the nature, that which is present. It observes the rise and the fall, and is the field of silence itself, out of which all these changes and fluctuations take place. That does not change. That is always the same. Like the ocean and all the rivers that pour into the great ocean. So, with millennia of ignorance, it's not gonna be an easy cut. But Krishna is doing his best here to deliver Arjuna. Give him the eyes to see. He lays further the example that this self is said to be unmanifest, means it's beyond a physical appearance. Incomprehensible, which means beyond the mind, beyond any idea you can make of it. Unchangeable, means it's beyond the field of perception of anything that you perceive as change. The sound, the taste, the touch, the smell, all the objects of the senses, all of those change. The self is beyond all that. Therefore, knowing it to be so, you should not grieve. Right? He says, even if you don't know this, even if you think that people die, you still shouldn't grieve. They're saying either way, you're good. Even if you think people begin and they end, they're born and they die, there's still no reason to grieve for that. For isn't it obvious that everything that is born dies? We all are equal in this regard of birth and death. And that which is born, death is certain. And to that which is dead, birth is certain. Like a snake that bites its tail, a continuous cycle. If you know that, why would you grieve over that? So, therefore, there's no point in grieving over what's unavoidable. If you know the self through the yoga of wisdom, you know that which does not die, which does not change, which is eternal and never moves. You're free from grief. And if you don't know that, if you know that everything is in a state of change, and just that's the way your nature is, and if your nature is unavoidable, if you know that, then there's still no reason to grieve. Our sorrow, our longing, is from an ignorance of not understanding our nature, or the way of ultimate reality. And this is why the first thing Krishna is addressing in this is the only way to cut through my friend and disciple is if he recognizes this wisdom. If he recognizes this, he can cut through. He can overcome his own grief. It's out of love and compassion he gives this message. It's not a philosophy. It's very practical in this day and age. So, all of nature is comprised, the law of nature, the law of cause and effect. We see it in the world that all beings who are ignorant of their nature, ignorant of the way of reality, is creating these various causes and conditions that lead further into misery. This is what is meant by the cycle of rebirth and the continuing of this pain and sorrow. Krishna is saying that all beings are manifest in their beginning, manifest in the middle, and then at the end of their life they're unmanifest again. Why then would you lament? So even the cycle of the manifest to the unmanifest, to the manifest, to the unmanifest, is a cycle like birth and death. And if you know that cycle as well, why would you grieve? If that's just the change of your nature. Beings are born, manifest, die, unmanifest. Where's your mom? Unmanifest. Born, manifest, die, unmanifest. This is the same cycle of birth and death. One that recognizes this is just change. What is there to grieve over that which is unavoidable? Continues. So, some of the wise, they look on the self as a wonder. And some speak of it as a wonder. Some hear of it as a wonder. Still others, though hearing, they do not understand it at all. So he concludes here in his statement that the self dwells in all bodies. That the self is all there is. So no one is excluded from it. The self which dwells in all bodies cannot be slain. Therefore you should not mourn for any creature. When he sees his mourning over his teachers, mourning over his grandfather, mourning over the battle that's about to occur. If he knew that which is unavoidable, birth and death is unavoidable, one doesn't grieve. And if one knows that he's not the slayer, he's not really the doer of the action, that the doer is his nature, and his nature is always in a constant state of change. And this is important to understand because it's the deep-seated ignorance. It's like, well, then who's doing it then? Who's causing all of this turmoil in my life? And it's the causes and the conditions of not knowing that which is unchanging, eternal, immortal, and everlasting. To help his friend, he has to help him see. And the seeing is the direct path. It's here right now. It can be cut through in an instant, but it's tough. Tough even if you're looking for it. Tough if you're trying to find it. So considering, trying to relate this to Arjuna, now considering also your own dharma, your own way of being, Arjuna, why are you wavering? For to a kshatriya like you, just a great noble warrior of the caste that protects all the other beings in the social order, nothing is better than a righteous war. For a kshatriya like Arjuna, who was born of a noble family, it is such an honor when the doors of a war opens up, and opens up effortlessly on its own. Like the gateways of heaven open up and one can be liberated. The attainment of heaven can be made in the sacrifice of laying one's own life down for the sake of the Lord can be made. All the warriors there who are assembled, they have the capability of making that sacrifice. And by fighting, the difference in perception, it can be seen as a noble cause. Happy indeed are the Kshatriyas, Krishna says, O Partha, to whom comes such a war, offering itself unsought, opening the gate of heaven. But if you refuse to fight this righteous war, then renouncing your own dharma and your honor, you will certainly incur sin. For a warrior, it is a warrior's obligation to fight, to actually stand for righteousness. When he sees unrighteousness, he is to defend the innocent, to be that protector. So for him to not act would incur the humiliation from among his peers and trusted kinsmen, calling him weak, calling him unmanly, calling him unfit to be on this field. So Krishna is saying the people will recount your infamy. And to a man who has been honored, such as Arjuna, the dishonor and the infamy is worse than death itself. To have those you've loved now look at you as a coward, somebody with no confidence and unmanly, who has been honorable all his life and has lost his reputation to fight when he's praised himself as a warrior who fights, and now he's scared. This is the incurring of the sin that Krishna is referring to. That the duty and the obligation here of a warrior is to be a warrior. You're not to be a milker. You're not a cow herdsman like I was in my youth. You're not a mother. You're not a sister. You're a warrior. So fight. The great warriors will think you have withdrawn from the battle, Krishna says to Arjuna, through fear, and you will go down in esteem as those in the minds of those who have thought much of you, for all those who have thought highly of you, for all those who've held you in high regard. They won't see you as such anymore. Do you want that, Arjuna? Do you want to be looked down upon now as a coward, a weakling? So his speech before wasn't working. Now he has to attack his manliness. This is what he's holding on to. Arjuna still has a sense of pride of having big balls. But to help Arjuna see, Krishna has to even go to this depths and attack his pride, his reputation on the line. He's doing this out of love, love for his disciple. So your enemies then will speak many words to you, he says, that should not be uttered, things you don't want to hear. They will scorn your prowess, your manlyhood, your valor. Could anything be more bitter than that? To actually taste those words, those you've held you in esteem and respect. So in reference to the confusion that Arjuna feels, he says to him, if you are killed in this battle, you will go to heaven. If you win, you enjoy the earth. Therefore, O son of Kunti, out of love for his mother, fight, set your mind and resolve to fight. Another cycle here, that if you win anyway, you will, because of your confidence, because of your mindset, because of your sacrifice, you get to enjoy the heavenly realms. And if you win in this battle, you're victorious, you enjoy the sovereignty of the earth. Either way you enjoy. Either way nothing is lost. Only you think something will be lost, or you're not seeing the way of reality. And Arjuna is still not sure, as he thinks that by acting I'm going to incur some kind of sin. I'm going to have a blemish on me. Krishna is not holding anything back. He goes even further. So regarding alike pleasure, pain, gain, loss, victory, defeat, fame, infamy, prepare yourself for battle. Thus, you will incur no sin. So, all those fluctuations of the mind, pain, infamy, pleasure, pain, success, defeat, that's just what is unreal. They're just the changes. And what is real is the nature of the self. That which is eternal. The ultimate reality is the name of this chapter. So, fortunately, it's still not enough to cut through. This is, he approached from the highest view. And, I mean, many of us, we can relate. How many of us are, even after hearing this, will actually grasp these words of Krishna? So, he's tried. He's tried to speak from the view of wisdom. He went from rationale, analysis. He has to go further now and lay the other yoga, the yoga of action. Maybe he can cut through Arjuna's pain. What has been declared to you, Krishna says, is the yoga of wisdom, called Samkhya. Samkhya is in reference to the discerning wisdom, to discern what is real from what is unreal. So this yoga of wisdom, now listen to the wisdom of yoga. He says, armed of which, O son of Pritha, you will break through these bonds of karma. So, he's now teaching him yoga, the yoga of action. Because he was not fit yet. He didn't have the right preparation to understand the nature of reality. And this is somebody who is able to discern directly the nature of reality, and somebody who doesn't have that capacity to understand it. So this is where he outlines action, to act, to fight. And he says, in this, no effort is ever lost, and no harm is ever done. In this yoga, every little bit of this dharma saves a man from the great fear. And great fear here is the cycle of birth and death, of being on a wheel of helplessness, pulled by the winds of your own fate, of your own causes and conditions of ignorance, of not seeing your own nature. No savior here. There's no one here to hold your hand. It is I who refuse to see. So, he's saying that this yoga, karma yoga, the yoga of action, is capable of also leading one to the highest good. If you don't have that capacity to directly perceive reality, this will get you there if you keep walking this path. And this is applicable to Everybody wants to act. Nobody really wants to sit still and meditate and to actually discern the nature of reality. But it can be possible. Liberation can be possible. The highest good being addressed here is the highest good of liberation. So, as in this, O sign of the Kuru, there is only one resolute and unwavering thought, but the thoughts of the irresolute are many-branched and unending. It says one who has walked the path of karma yoga, the pathway of action, is walking this for the single purpose of purification. You're acting in this world, surrendering the results, surrendering the attachments to the actions. While those who are not aware of this pathway of yoga, they're searching in many different directions, and I'm sure you can relate to the many paths, the many branches, the many friends and relatives pulling you in diverse courses. I don't want to listen to this person. I want to listen to this person. I want to do this. I want to go to this land. And pulled with 1,000 branches in many directions. The one who is walking the pathway of yoga, of action, that Krishna is now outlining to his dear friend, is that with the mind resolute on the highest good of liberation, self-realization, self-knowledge, then action would be for the highest good. And your mind is steady on that purpose. It's resolute that I can act in this world and I can still recognize my nature. And recognizing the nature is important for the end of suffering. Here you see that if you don't recognize it, you're still caught on a wheel. Buddhists, you would know what this is. This is my analogy that Krishna is pointing to the same direction that many of the great Buddhas and enlightened ones are pointing to. How to step out of suffering and how to step out of the wheel. So the selfish action is motivated by desire, but one who walks in the pathway of karma yoga, of action, is beyond desire. Because how this works is that the fruit of the desire can be surrendered, it can be offered, and this offering is a sacrifice, which is why I said that the end of all actions lead into a sacrifice, and the sacrifice itself opens the doorway for the highest good, the knowledge of the nature of ultimate reality, which is the name of this chapter, self-knowledge, to be actualized. So one can achieve it through action. For all you doubters, it can be achieved through the body. It can be achieved through union. You can still have sex. You can still do that. You can still drink wine if you want to. It's not ruled out to you. But recognition has to be there. The resoluteness, the surrender, the sacrifice, the offering of oneself as an instrument, and an instrument only. You can be in the world and still enjoy. This is possible, as Krishna outlines. This should be big news for you. Those that, well, that wisdom stuff sounds hard. I don't know if I could do that. That sounds like a lot of work to actually... I don't know what you're saying, Sage. I don't know what you're saying. I've been listening for an hour. I still don't... Through action, it can be actualized. No. Stick with it. This is the toughest chapter out of all of them, and it's only chapter 2. He refines it in the later chapters. So, he throws the dagger in the beginning. He throws it all. So, of course, I sympathize with you. It's not that easy to understand this. But it's possible, and this is where the balance is the equality, the equanimity, that the yoga of action is really applicable to everybody. Everybody can act. Even for this day and age, this is a modern retelling of an ancient yoga, an ancient system that is applicable. Not just in the past, but now, here, in this day and age, in this time. O Partha, he addresses Arjuna, no resolute and unwavering thought is formed in the minds of those who are deeply attached to pleasure and power, who allow their discrimination to be stolen away by the flowery words of the unwise, who permit their souls to be ridden with desires, who regard the attainment of heaven as the highest goal, and who take great delight in quoting the panegyric texts of the Vedas and declare that besides these there is nothing. These texts promise rebirth as the reward of their actions, and lay down in specific rites for the attainment of pleasure and power. That even in the text, you can still be attached to the fruit that's being outlined. The promise of heaven can still be a reward, can still be a hamper for the yoga of action. A karma yogi getting caught in the flowery words, what this teacher said, what Sajan said, what Krishna said, what Shankaracharya said, getting caught in the flowery words, unable to surrender, sacrifice even the thought and the attachment to an idea, a thought, an opinion, still becomes a hamper. This is why he says, for those who are not resolute, those who have not made their mind to actually walk this path, and who still waver, it's difficult, but for the unwavering, you can do this. You can walk into those areas, and with that unwavering mind, you can go into those actions. Watch it liberate, dissolve, free your mind, purify, so that the wisdom happens, it comes. And the nature of ultimate reality is the fruit. That too is surrendered and given. So, not even the study of the Vedas, he's saying, is leading to the realms of liberation. This is the pathway of action in a way that even your study of all the ancient texts, even the study of the Bhagavad Gita, even the study of this will not lead you to liberation if your mind is not resolute, if your mind is not unwavering, if your mind is not determined to commit to go to the very end. It requires a courageous soul, a courageous being to walk that path. In this regard, it's said that the Vedas, Krishna is outlining, deals with the three gunas. Be free, O Arjuna, of the three gunas. Be free from the pairs of opposites. Be always established in sattva. Do not try to acquire what you lack or preserve what you have. Be established in the self. So Vedas, they mean the knowledge. And all knowledge is just various ways that the three gunas have been organized. And we can understand the gunas from our mind. First of all, an active mind would be a Rajaguna. Rajas is like a king, very active. You would understand this in your body as the sympathetic nervous system of an outward pulsing flow. So even these flows, you become attached to it. I need to do more. I need to get shit done. I need to conquer the world. I don't have time to listen to Sajan. Bhagavad Gita, who's got time for that? I think I want to sleep. And that's where the parasympathetic system, and this is tamaguna, just inertia. Easier for me to just rest. It seems like a lot of work. And yet, action is not balanced. So the parasympathetic system relates with the tamaguna. The sympathetic system relates with the rajaguna. The sattva guna, which Krishna is saying to be established in, being established in sattva, which represents the pure mind. And this is really the fruit of the karma yogi, who can now balance the two forces of rajaguna and tamaguna, and the central nervous system, the central axis, you would understand as the energy of sattva, the pure mind, when the two come in harmony. So why I said to be established in sattva. Oh, to the enlightened Brahmin, all the Vedas are as much as a pond when there's everywhere a flood. Well, what good is the knowledge, he's saying, if the ocean of wisdom is everywhere? By acting, you're purifying your intention. The Vedas are like a cup of water, but the ocean of wisdom is surrounding you. You don't have to get caught up in the cup. You go beyond, reside in sattva, reside in the equality, the equalness of it all. This cup of water is not any better than the ocean. But it can help to lead you to the ocean. And it's a tool. But you don't have to get caught up in it. This is what is meant by the surrendering of the fruit, surrendering of the action itself. It says, and to work alone is why it's important to work. To work alone, you are entitled never to its fruit. Neither let your motive be the fruit of action, nor let your attachment be to non-action. So the balance of the Rajaguna, Tamaguna, and Sattvaguna. Sympathetic, parasympathetic, central nervous system. Neither let your attachment be to its fruit. You mean the cup, or the water in the cup. I want the good stuff. This water is inseparable from the ocean, and nor to the fruit. I think I'm going to try to find a better cup, a better drink, something better than this. Nor let your attachment be to non-action. Or I'm not going to try to find any cup. I don't want anything to drink. I'm just not even going to try. There's a balance there between the two. And one is aware, they're resolute on this balance, resolute on surrendering the attachment, so surrendering the aversion, dwelling in that middleness. Understand that they are standing in the middle of a battlefield. They are in the midst of the two polarities right there, Rajaguna and Tamaguna. Krishna is representing Sattvaguna. So his analogy and the story is, you can see it from your own mind. It's that's perceived. So be established in yoga, O Dhananjaya. He says, perform your actions, cast off all attachments, and remain even-minded, both in success and failure. This evenness, this equanimity of mind is yoga. Equanimity of mind. Which means that you're not upset if the story is boring, nor are you attached to the next chapter. You're equanimous here. I know yogis who read this again and again. Far inferior indeed is mere action, O Dhananjaya. to action perform with evenness of mind. Seek refuge in this evenness, in this equanimity, the equalness of it all. Wretched are they who work for the fruits, for the results. So he's referring to the resoluteness. If your mind is resolute, unwavering, far superior is that action than to a mind who is many-branched and diverse. Endued with the evenness of mind, he casts off in this very life both the good and the evil deeds. Therefore strive for yoga. Yoga is the skill in the action. So both good and evil, just concepts of the mind. The yogi goes beyond the concept to a state of equanimity. The wise, Krishna says, of even mind, they renounce the fruit of the action. They're freed from the fetters of birth. They attain the state that is beyond all evil. And when your mind has crossed the slough of delusion, you will achieve indifference regarding things already heard and things yet to be heard. And you're not chasing anymore. You see everything in a state of equanimity. And you're equal. Which means it's Vedanta, the end of knowledge. What we've come to in the beginning. Ultimate reality is perceived now and here. So Arjuna, he's got some questions now. He says, what, oh Keshava, what are the qualities of the man of wisdom? What does he look like? What is he described as? How does a man of wisdom speak? How does he move? And addressing Partha, Krishna says that when a man completely casts off all the desires of his mind, his self, finding satisfaction in itself alone, then he is called a man of steady wisdom. Oh, this is referred to as the self with a small s. Anything that we refer to as I, me, or mine, it takes refuge in itself. It means the ultimate reality. That which is even. That which is unchanging. Taking refuge in that, one encounters a man of wisdom. That equality of mind is the characteristic that you can determine who's wise and who's not. He who is not perturbed by adversity, who does not long for happiness, who is free from attachment, fear, and wrath, is called a sage of steady wisdom. He who is not attached to anything, who neither rejoices nor is vexed when he obtains good or evil, his wisdom is firmly fixed. Moreover, when he completely withdraws the senses from their objects, as a tortoise draws in its limbs, then his wisdom is firmly fixed. This is an example here of the fifth limb of yoga, pratyahara. Say that you can see the sage, you can see the wise man, like a tortoise who draws in its limbs. Pratyahara is the withdrawal of the senses. After your practice in yoga, even hatha yoga is an example of karma yoga. Through the limbs, yamas, niyamas, your conducts, your behaviors in the world, your practices, your spiritual practices, they're all recognition of the nature of reality. They are, in fact, the ultimate reality. Rather, the asanas is the action. that one fine-tunes his realization. You purify the obstacles to this recognition. Pranayamas, you develop your capacity to stabilize, to hold that recognition. And then pratyahara is your withdrawal of the senses from the external world. So the 5 senses being sound, taste, touch, smell, and sight, corresponding through the ear, the skin, the nose, the tongue, and the eyes. When these are not grasping at the objects, the eyes grasping at sight, the tongue grasping at taste, the nose grasping at a smell, the skin grasping to a touch. This is a sign of wisdom. It's being referred to when the tortoise, who lives a long life of longevity, a symbol of immortal health. The objects of the senses fall away from a man, he says, practicing abstinence, but not the taste for them. But even the taste falls away when the Supreme is seen. He said even if you're suppressing the senses, you can still have the thoughts in your mind. But when the ultimate nature is recognized, drawn in like a tortoise, then even the mental cravings to liberate themselves. The turbulent senses, O son of Kunti, violently carrying off the mind even of a wise man striving for perfection. That even the wise have to observe their mind. It's even the thought of something is capable of carrying the mind like the wind carrying a ship. And therefore the yogi restrains them all, even the mental activity, and remains intent on me, the supreme, ultimate reality. His wisdom is steady whose senses are under control like a tortoise who draws in its own limbs. The senses withdraw its attachment from its objects, and one rests within the self. When a man dwells on objects, he feels an attachment for them. Attachment gives rise to desire, and desire breeds anger. And from anger comes delusion, and from delusion the failure of memory. From the failure of memory, the ruin of discrimination. And from the ruin of discrimination, the man perishes. So this is when the mind's carried away by attachment, aversion. The mind is not at ease, and if there's aversion, comes anger. And from the anger, you have confusion. You're deluded because you don't see correctly what is real and what is unreal. This is where the failure of memory takes place, as we forget things that are discussed. You may even forget what we discussed today. You forget the instructions of the teachers, or even the instructions that Krishna has given. And this is the loss of the discriminating wisdom that happens when there is no self-control. The self becomes, you just let your mind slip away into the wind. No self-control, you're not stable, nor are you a benefit in this world. So what good is the man without self-control? The man of self-control, Krishna continues, he can move among the objects of the senses. So if you have self-control, you can actually enjoy life. And this is, you don't have to negate sex. You don't have to negate food. You can enjoy these things if you have self-control. And if your mind does not have it, then it may be necessary to understand, step away, equalize the mind, come to a state of balance. The balance is the central axis, residing in sattva, understanding the two polarities, rajaguna, tamaguna, sympathetic, parasympathetic system. A man of self-control abides within the center. He who has a self-control can now enjoy the objects of his senses which are under his restraint, which means now the sound can be enjoyed, the touch can be enjoyed, the sensual pleasures, the taste, the sight, the visionary appearances. This is open. The world opens up to you. For those who are listening, you've come this far, you can enjoy life if you have self-control. This is good news. But if you don't, that's no different than the demonic nature, which will be discussed in chapter 13. So, with the senses under restraint and free from attachment and hatred, he attains the serenity of mind, which is the central axis here. The balancing between Rajaguna and Tamaguna. They come together, and one abides in sattva, the pure mind of serenity. So, through serenity, in this serenity there's an end of all sorrow. It means in this balance, this equanimity, you find the end. The end of sorrow, cessation. That's good news as well. You're like, why are you studying this? Cessation, man. The end of sorrow. For the intelligence of the man of serene mind soon becomes steady. Abiding in that equanimity, even your wisdom becomes stabilized. And you stabilize your view, and the nature of reality becomes your living existence, becomes the way things already are, through less and less effort. But the resoluteness has to be there. The resoluteness to reside within that self-control and live like the tortoise for some time, that draw within its senses. And if your mind is overwhelmed by the senses, be the tortoise. Go within. So, only one who has the peace of mind can attain that happiness and serenity. This is stated by Krishna, who the man whose mind is not under his control, he has no wisdom, he has no knowledge of the self, no knowledge of ultimate reality, only for the self-controlled. And no contemplation either, which means that he can't comprehend the changing from the unchanging, no discriminative wisdom. Without contemplation, he has no peace of mind. And without peace, how can he have happiness? So this is really about peace and the end of suffering. Why is that so? Why is a man who doesn't have self-control not capable of actualizing peace? This is addressed by Krishna in the statement that for even one of the roving senses, just one sense, it carries away the mind of discrimination as the wind carries away a ship on water. And this is the analogy that your mind's carried away. You're not in control of your own mind. And it leads, therefore, he says, O mighty Arjuna, his wisdom is steady whose senses are completely restrained from their objects. In that which is night to all beings, the man of self-control is awake. And when all beings are awake, there is night for the Muni who sees. It means while everyone is engaging in their senses, or engaging in the sensory pleasures and just doing it unconsciously, the man of self-control is conscious. And when everyone is asleep, he's aware. He's still abiding in the self. So it's through this surrender of the attachment of the fruit that one attains the peace that is being outlined. And not saying that nothing has to be, that you don't have to be in the world, that you can still be in the world. And this is exemplified that not the desire of desires attains peace, but he into whom all desires enter, as the waters enter the ocean, which is full to the brim, grounded in stillness. So, it's not the one who is desiring, but you know that all of the senses, the sense consciousnesses, are like rivers. And you're capable, with self-control, to let them enter the ocean. Like a river, it's its destination anyway. It liberates itself in the great ocean of consciousness, the great ocean of awareness. And Krishna here is the embodiment of that Narayana, meaning he who rests upon the great ocean. The five senses are just rivers and streams. And in the controlled one, peace of mind can be attained if you know that the streams all enter into the great ocean. They all enter into Krishna. This is why he's called Harishikesha, the Lord of the senses, the Lord of yoga. But that man who lives completely free from his desires, without longing, and he's devoid of the sense of I, me, and mine, he attains that peace, equanimity. And this devotion is acknowledged by saying that this state that is actualized, peace of mind, is the Brahman that is extolled and told in the Vedas. This is the state of Satchidananda, of existence, consciousness, and bliss. That is the great ocean. That is the way of ultimate reality. And he summarized the essence of all the Vedas, all of the Puranas, all of the Upanishads, and what Brahman actually is. The essence of the Samkhya philosophy. This is the Brahmic state. O son of Pritha, attaining to it, one is no longer deluded. Being established therein, even in the hour of death, one attains final liberation in Brahman. So, the end of knowledge, Vedanta. This is chapter 2, and he laid it hard. Let's contemplate this. I'm not sure Arjuna is convinced quite yet, though. After all of that. So, I'll see you in chapter 3, the way of action.